Imagine you are like just sitting at your desk, minding your own business, and an email drops into your inbox. You open it, and the very first line reads, "Per my last email."
Oh, man.
Right. Instantly, your heart rate spikes, your jaw crunches, the adrenaline just like hits your bloodstream, and you are suddenly mentally preparing for a full-on battle right there in your ergonomic office chair.
It is the most universal human experience, I swear.
We have all been there. Whether you are prepping for a really tense corporate meeting or trying to decode loaded messages from a client, or, maybe you are just insanely curious about why human beings can be so completely infuriating to interact with. Welcome to today's deep dive, where we are unpacking the actual mechanics of interpersonal friction.
And the framework we're using today to decode all these interactions comes from this fascinating lesson called Navigating Difficult Personalities with Advanced English Diplomacy.
Yes, exactly.
And our mission here is that we aren't just looking at the polite words people use to cover up their hostility. We're actually looking at the underlying psychological drivers of that hostility. And, well, more importantly, how to disarm it.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because dealing with a demanding boss or a complaining neighbor or that one colleague who just drives you completely crazy, it feels incredibly personal in the moment.
Oh, absolutely.
Your instincts just scream at you to either fight back or run away. But handling that frustration well, keeping your professional reputation intact while holding your ground, that requires a very specific toolkit.
Right. And it requires diagnosing the behavior before you actually react to it. Because if you can understand why someone is acting a certain way, if you can identify that hidden driver, you can choose the exact right diplomatic tool to neutralize the situation.
Which is so hard to do when you're mad.
Oh, totally. But rather than getting swept up in the emotional turbulence, you become like a diagnostician.
I want to start right there, actually, with the diagnosis phase. Because before we can get to the elegant diplomatic responses, we have to accurately identify the friction. So let's look at the loudest, most visible personalities in the room. The people who just constantly generate static.
Yeah, and there is a fantastic idiom in the diplomatic framework we're exploring for this exact phenomenon.
Yeah.
It's when someone rubs you the wrong way.
Right, rubbing you the wrong way.
Yeah, it basically describes that feeling of being intensely annoyed by someone without necessarily being able to point to one massive, overt insult.
The analogy often used for rubbing someone the wrong way is petting a cat backwards, which, if you've ever actually done that, you know exactly what happens.
Does not go well.
No, it creates instant visible friction. The hair stands straight up, the cat gets immediately agitated, and the whole energy of the room just shifts.
Exactly.
That visceral physical reaction is exactly what it feels like when you interact with certain archetypes in the workplace. Your internal hackles just go up the second they start talking.
And if we categorize those loud archetypes, the first one we inevitably run into is the classic know-it-all.
Oh boy.
Right. This is the individual who behaves as if they have an absolute monopoly on the truth.
We all know this person. They are the ones constantly interrupting in meetings. They will derail a 30-minute presentation to correct a tiny, completely irrelevant detail, like the date on a slide from 3 years ago, just to prove they know it.
Yep, seen it 100 times.
And they demand to have the last word every single time. But my question is, do they actually think they are being helpful, in their minds, or they're just trying to ensure accuracy?
Well, what's fascinating here is the underlying mechanism of the interruption itself. It's rarely about the factual accuracy of that slide from 3 years ago.
Really?
No, the know-it-all interrupts to break your conversational momentum. By correcting a minor detail, they're establishing intellectual dominance. Yeah, they aren't trying to move the project forward at all. They are trying to dictate the hierarchy of the room. They need everyone to acknowledge that they are the gatekeeper of the quote-unquote correct way to do things.
That makes a lot of sense. It's an ego play disguised as quality control.
Precisely.
And closely related to that is another archetype we see constantly, which is the devil's advocate. This is a person who argues against an idea, supposedly just to test it or provoke a debate. But I really want to push back on this being labeled as a purely difficult behavior.
Okay, let's hear it.
Isn't playing devil's advocate a legitimate, necessary tool for critical thinking? I mean, if we don't stress test our plans and find the weak points, we end up launching bad projects, right?
Well, you're right to point that out, because in theory, it absolutely should be a robust tool for critical thinking. But what's fascinating is that if we look at the behavioral patterns of difficult personalities, we see that this legitimate tool is frequently weaponized.
Weaponized how?
Well, The phrase, let me just play devil's advocate for a second, it becomes a shield. It allows a toxic colleague to be entirely contrary, to shoot down everyone else's hard work, and to assert their superiority without taking any real responsibility for offering a better solution.
I see. So it's a loophole.
Exactly.
It's a socially acceptable way to tear down a project. Because if they say, let me play devil's advocate, they are placing themselves in the role of an objective judge.
Yes. And they get to do all the critiquing without having to do any of the vulnerable heavy lifting of actually creating an idea.
That is so true.
And because it is framed as this recognized intellectual exercise, it is incredibly difficult to call them out. If you get frustrated, they just throw their hands up and say, hey, I'm just trying to help the project. I guess you just can't handle constructive criticism.
Ugh, infuriating.
It really is. It leaves you looking defensive. Well, they get to walk away feeling intellectually superior. It's a very overt, loud form of friction that completely stalls progress.
Okay, so we've talked about the loud, obvious friction of the know-it-all and the devil's advocate. But what happens when the friction goes underground?
The quiet ones.
Yeah, because as frustrating as the loud interrupters are, dealing with covert warfare feels significantly more dangerous to navigate. Let's look at the quiet saboteurs.
We are talking about passive aggressiveness,
Yeah.
which is widely considered the absolute hardest behavior to manage in any professional setting.
Even just hearing the phrase makes my shoulders tense up because it's so slippery.
It is entirely designed to be slippery. Passive aggressiveness is basically the act of expressing anger or frustration or a desire for control indirectly, rather than addressing it openly.
Right.
Instead of coming to your desk and saying, I'm upset with you about how this project is going, they find these sideways methods to punish you or make their displeasure known.
The workplace examples of this are universally recognized, like the colleague who suddenly CCs your manager and maybe their manager on an email about a tiny, completely insignificant mistake you made.
Oh, a classic move.
It's this incredibly subtle way of putting you on blast and trying to make you look incompetent. But if you walk over to their desk and confront them about it, they have the perfect built-in excuse. Oh, I just wanted to keep management in the loop. Transparency is key.
And that built-in excuse is what psychologists call plausible deniability.
Plausible deniability.
Yes, that is the engine that makes passive-aggressive behavior run. It forces the recipient of the behavior to question their own reality. You know it was an attack, they know it was an attack, but because the language used was technically professional, you can't prove it.
Which brings us right back to the phrase we started this whole deep dive with, the ultimate corporate insult. Starting an email with, per my last email.
Yes.
Here's where it gets really interesting, because let's be honest about what this actually means. When someone types that, the subtext is roaring.
Oh, it's deafening.
It translates roughly to, if you possessed basic reading comprehension skills, you would already know the answer to this and you wouldn't be bothering me.
Pretty much.
It is completely wrapped up in standard business vocabulary, but the message is pure hostility.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to ask why people choose this route. I mean, why spend all this energy crafting a perfectly deniable, hostile email?
Right. Why not just be direct?
Exactly. Why not just say, hey, I'm frustrated that you missed the information I sent earlier? The core reason is a fear of vulnerability.
Vulnerability.
Yes, passive-aggressive behavior allows a difficult person to strike a blow while entirely avoiding the potential messiness of a direct confrontation.
Oh, that makes sense.
Standing face-to-face with someone and owning your anger is vulnerable. It invites a counterattack. A passive-aggressive person wants to inflict the sting, but they were terrified of the actual fight.
Wow, that reframes it completely. It's conflict for people who are deeply afraid of conflict.
Exactly.
But the problem is, the recipient still feels the sting. The friction is still there, rotting away at the foundation of the working relationship. So, having diagnosed these toxic behaviors, the dominance play of the know-it-all, the weaponized shield of the devil's advocate, and the slippery, deniable attacks of the passive-aggressive emailer, how do we actually respond?
Right. What's the move?
Yeah, how do we intervene without becoming the toxic person ourselves?
Well, the diplomacy toolkit moves along a spectrum, starting with passive survival and moving toward proactive intervention.
Yeah.
The most passive mechanism is biting your tongue.
Forcing yourself to stay silent, like when the know-it-all interrupts you for the 5th time in a meeting and you just clamp your mouth shut, stare at your notepad, and wait for it to be over to avoid a blowout fight.
Yeah.
It's pure survival mode.
It is. And, you know, we should acknowledge that sometimes in the very short term, Biting your tongue is tactically necessary. You don't have the energy, or maybe the power dynamic is just too skewed against you in that specific moment.
Yeah.
But you cannot bite your tongue indefinitely. The resentment will build, and it will eventually leak out. So this is where the framework introduces active intervention. And the first tool is to nip it in the bud.
Right, which comes from gardening. Snipping off a small, unopened flower bud before it has the chance to bloom and grow roots.
Exactly.
In human dynamics, it means stopping a bad situation early before it escalates into an established pattern of behavior.
Correct. You establish the boundary the very first time the boundary is tested.
But wait, this is where I get tripped up. Let's say a coworker subtly takes credit for one minor idea of yours during, a Tuesday morning stand-up.
Okay.
If I immediately pull them aside and confront them, if I nip it in the bud in week 1 over something small, don't I look unhinged?
Well,
Don't I suddenly look like the aggressive fiction maker who is paranoid about credit? How do you intervene that early without escalating the drama?
that is exactly the trap most people fall into, and it is why how you intervene matters just as much as when. If you go in hot, accusing them of stealing, you do look aggressive. You have to use a diplomatic tactic called clearing the air.
Clearing the air.
Yes, this means openly discussing the hidden conflict to remove the static from the environment, but doing it through a very specific linguistic framing. You completely abandon you statements, and you strictly use I statements.
Let's break that down because the phrasing changes everything.
It really does.
Instead of charging up to their desk and using a you statement like, you're always stealing my ideas, you did it again in that meeting.
Yeah.
You pivot to your own experience. An I statement.
Right.
I felt a bit sidelined in today's meeting when my contribution to that slide wasn't mentioned.
And this raises an important question about the neurology of human defensiveness. Why does that slight change in phrasing work?
Yeah, why is it so different?
When you start a sentence with you always or you never, the listener's brain literally perceives a threat. The amygdala, which processes fear and aggression, flares up. Yet it cannot differentiate between a verbal attack on their character and a physical predator. They instantly go into fight or flight mode.
Oh.
Cortisol floods their system, the logical part of their brain shuts down, and they stop listening to whatever you say next because they are entirely focused on formulating their defense or attacking you back.
Wow. So by saying you are biologically guaranteeing that the conversation will fail.
Yes, it's a physiological response. But by framing the complaint with an I statement, I felt sidelined. Do you bypass that threat detection system?
Because it's about me, not them.
Exactly. You are stating an unarguable fact about your own internal emotional state. They cannot tell you that you didn't feel sidelined.
Right.
It doesn't trigger their fight or flight response
Yeah.
because you aren't accusing them of a character flaw. You are just presenting a situation that needs to be solved. You prevent backing the difficult person into a corner.
You leave them a graceful exit route that doesn't require them to fight you to save face. So what does this all mean for us on a random Tuesday afternoon? It means true diplomacy is not about being a pushover. It doesn't mean you just let the know-it-all walk all over you and bite your tongue until you retire.
Definitely not.
True diplomacy is the ability to confidently stand your ground and address the issue head on, but doing it with such precision that you refuse to get in the mud with them. You don't mirror their toxicity. You maintain your professional altitude.
You hold the line without raising your heart rate. But to apply this toolkit to nip things in the bud, clear the air, and use I statements effectively without sounding like a robotic HR manual requires one final fundamental shift in perspective.
Okay, what is it?
And to illustrate this, we need to look at the ultimate boss-level challenge of difficult personalities.
Oh, I know exactly where we are going. The micromanager.
The micromanager, a supervisor who completely lacks trust and constantly hovers, dictating every microscopic detail of how a task should be executed rather than trusting you to deliver the final result.
The phrase that always comes up with micromanagement is stepping on someone's toes, meaning offending someone by interfering in their specific area of responsibility,
Right.
which is, by definition, what a micromanager does to you all day long. But here is the massive paradox. It's also exactly what you risk doing to them if you handle the situation poorly.
Yes.
You cannot just look at your boss and say, please back off and leave me alone, I know how to do my job, even if it's 100% true.
No, you definitely cannot do that.
Because telling a manager to stop managing is stepping on their toes. It challenges their authority. It is a complete trap.
Well, it is a trap if you only look at the surface level behavior. If you only see a boss who is annoying you. But the diplomatic framework offers a counterintuitive solution here. You have to treat conflict resolution like a puzzle.
A puzzle.
Yeah, your goal is not to fight the micromanager for territory. Your goal is to figure out their hidden fear.
This strategy completely flipped my understanding of office dynamics. Let's walk through a real scenario.
Okay, let's do it.
You have a boss who pings you on Slack every single hour, asking for a status update on a presentation. You're just watching a little typing bubble appear over and over. They are driving you up the wall.
The worst.
Human instinct says to pull away, to create boundaries, to take longer to reply, to hide your screen. But the advanced strategy is the exact opposite. The strategy is to over-communicate, to manage the manager.
And let's break down the psychology of why pulling away fails and why over-communication works. A micromanager's hovering behavior is almost never about you or your competence.
It's not.
No, it is driven by their own internal hidden fear of losing control. They are terrified that if they aren't monitoring every keystroke, the project will fail, their boss will be angry, and they will lose their status.
Okay, that makes sense.
If you pull away and act secretive to protect your boundaries, you accidentally validate their worst fear. You signal to them that things are happening out of their sight. That spikes their anxiety, which makes their micromanaging 10 times worse.
It creates a self-fulfilling prophecy. Your attempt to gain space actually causes them to suffocate you more.
Exactly.
But the diplomatic pivot is brilliant. Instead of getting defensive, you proactively go to them. You say, I know this presentation is a huge priority for our department. How about I send you a structured, brief progress update at 4 p.m. every single day so we don't need to disrupt our workflow with hourly check-ins.
Look at what that specific phrasing achieves. You are directly addressing their underlying fear without explicitly calling them fearful.
Right.
You are calmly assuring them that the project is safe and that you share their priorities.
Yeah.
You are feeding them the daily information, the control that they so desperately crave. But the genius of it is that you're doing it entirely on your own terms.
You dictate the schedule. You decide what goes into the 4 p.m. summary. You have successfully managed up by solving the puzzle of their anxiety, rather than fighting their behavior.
You've neutralized the threat by making them feel safe. And that shift in perspective changes the entire landscape of professional interaction.
It really does. It changes everything. You are no longer navigating an office full of monsters who are out to sabotage you. You are walking into a room full of puzzles. You are asking, what is this person actually afraid of?
Exactly.
And that brings us full circle to you, our listener. We have journeyed through the loud, ego-driven friction of the know-it-all, the covert, deniable warfare of the passive-aggressive emailer, and the suffocating grip of the micromanager.
We covered a lot of ground.
We really did. You now have an advanced linguistic arsenal. You understand the difference between passively biting your tongue and actively nipping a rumor in the bud. You know how to bypass the brain's fight-or-flight response by clearing the air with I statements rather than backing someone into a corner with accusations.
And, most crucially, you have a psychological framework to view difficult people with a degree of analytical detachment. You can look past the infuriating behavior and look for the hidden driver.
It is incredibly empowering. It takes the emotional sting out of the conflict. It stops your heart rate from spiking when that email comes in and turns the interaction into a strategic exercise.
It does. But before we officially wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over.
Oh, here we go.
We have spent this entire deep dive looking outward. We've applied this diagnostic framework to other people, figuring out what the difficult colleague or the demanding boss is actually afraid of. But let's flip that mirror around for a moment.
Oh, this is the hard part.
It is. Because we all have bad days. We all get stressed, we all face impossible deadlines, and we all have egos.
True.
So the next time you feel the sudden urge to play devil's advocate in a meeting, just to prove you are the smartest person in the room.
Guilty.
Or the next time you find yourself wanting to aggressively micromanage a junior colleague's perfectly fine work. Or, perhaps most tellingly, the next time you feel the petty, undeniable satisfaction of typing out a passive-aggressive per my last email stop.
Just pause.
Pause your hands on the keyboard and ask yourself the exact same puzzle question. What hidden fear is driving your behavior in that exact moment?
Are you afraid of losing your relevance on the team? Are you terrified of being blamed for a mistake you didn't make? Are you avoiding a vulnerable conversation?
It's heavy.
It is a deeply uncomfortable question to ask yourself, but it is such a necessary one if we want to truly master diplomacy. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the messy, complicated, and fascinating world of human interaction.
It's been great.
We hope you leave today feeling a little more equipped for your next tense meeting and a little more analytical about your difficult inbox. Keep questioning the world around you, keep learning, and most importantly, enjoy the process of discovery. We'll catch you on the next one.
Imagine you are sitting in a boardroom. The air conditioning is like slightly too cold, but you are still sweating.
Oh man, I can picture it already, the tension in the room.
Right. And your CEO is sitting at the head of the table, capping a pen, asking why the Q3 deliverable is 3 weeks behind schedule.
The dreaded question.
Exactly. And the coworker sitting next to you, the exact same person you just bought a coffee for, like an hour ago, points directly at you and lies.
Wow. Just right there in front of the CEO.
Right there. They look at the CEO and say, well, Emma was in charge of the timeline, so it's her fault.
Ouch.
Yeah. Your heart rate instantly spikes to, 120 beats per minute. The blood just completely rushes out of your prefrontal cortex.
You're in a full panic mode at that point.
Completely. And what you say in the next 3 seconds dictates not just the outcome of this meeting, but really the trajectory of your entire reputation at this company.
It's a make or break moment, for sure.
It is. So today, we are breaking down the exact psychological framework you need to survive that incredibly visceral moment. Welcome to this deep dive.
I'm so excited to get into this.
Same here. Whether you are currently prepping for a high-stakes negotiation or trying to decode the passive aggression of a really difficult colleague, or, you are just insanely curious about the hidden mechanics of human interaction under pressure.
Which is fascinating all on its own.
It is. And this deep dive is completely engineered for you. So what are we actually looking at today?
Well, we are dissecting a really fascinating piece of source material. It's actually a C2 Advanced English Listening Practice Guide.
Okay, wait, an English listening guide. That sounds a bit like a grammar lesson.
Right, I know. On the surface, it looks like a lesson focused purely on the vocabulary of conflict resolution. But if we look a little closer, these advanced English idioms aren't just linguistic quirks.
Okay, so what are they?
They are a crystallized, highly tactical roadmap for navigating, surviving, and repairing deeply personal workplace conflicts. The words we use to frame a crisis actually dictate the cognitive options we have available to solve it.
Okay, let's unpack this, because we definitely aren't doing a grammar lesson today.
Absolutely not.
We are taking these phrases and using them to reverse engineer human behavior. Because conflict, as we just established with that boardroom scenario, it's not about an annoying email thread. It is a biological event.
It really hits you right in the chest. You feel it physically.
You do. And before we can even talk about resolving a conflict, we have to examine how a toxic one actually begins.
Which brings us to the first part of our source material.
Yeah. It starts with what is arguably the ultimate workplace betrayal, which is the phrase, throwing someone under the bus.
Oh, yeah. The classic. The source defines this as betraying a colleague or friend for personal advantage, specifically by blaming them for a mistake just to save yourself.
Which is exactly what happened in our boardroom scenario.
Exactly. But let's look at the mechanics of why that specific idiom resonates so universally. The audio guide explicitly mentions the ouch factor.
The ouch factor. I love that.
It's so accurate. Think about the physical imagery here. You are walking along, minding your own business, assuming you are in a pedestrian zone.
A safe, collaborative environment.
Yes. And suddenly, a massive, lethal vehicle just completely flattens you. The betrayal is catastrophic because it is entirely asymmetrical.
Right. There is absolutely no warning.
None. It transforms a cooperative system into a survival of the fittest battleground in just a fraction of a second.
And the suddenness is what paralyzes you. In that boardroom, when your coworker blames you for the timeline, your brain registers it as a literal physical ambush.
It really does. Your body doesn't know the difference between a social threat and a physical one.
Right. The source asks a very direct question of the listener in this scenario. It says, do you shout? Do you cry?
Which are both very natural reactions.
They are. Because from a neurobiological standpoint, you're experiencing a total amygdala hijack. Your evolutionary hardware is screaming at you that you are under attack by a predator.
Your adrenal glands are just flushing your system with catecholamines.
Yes. The urge to erupt, to shout, to defend your life is overwhelming.
What's fascinating here is that fight or flight response is triggered so violently because this act violates the foundational, unwritten social contract of any organized group.
Which is what, exactly?
So the tribe protects its members. When someone breaches that contract for personal advantage to save their own skin at your expense, your brain interprets it not just as a professional setback, but as an existential threat to your standing in the community.
Which makes the instinct to retaliate, like, almost impossible to suppress.
Completely.
It's like a sinking ship. If you are thrown into the freezing water, your first, most biologically hardwired instinct is to pull the person who pushed you in down with you.
You want to grab their life vest.
Exactly. You want to throw them right back under the bus. I mean, in that 3-second window in the boardroom, every fiber of your being wants to look at the CEO and scream, well, actually, the timeline failed because your design was a complete disaster and you missed every internal deadline.
Oh, it is so tempting to just let loose.
So tempting. But here's my question. Why is that raw defensive counterattack the absolute worst strategic move we can make?
Because retaliation instantly converts you from the victim of an ambush into a mutual combatant in a localized war.
Okay, wow. A mutual combatant.
Yeah. The moment you throw them back under the bus, the CEO is no longer looking at one desperate employee trying to shift blame. The CEO is now observing a spectacle of complete systemic dysfunction.
You both just look terrible.
You both look chaotic. You both look like massive liabilities. And the source is really adamant on this point. While your initial reaction is anger, you cannot lose your temper.
Right, you have to keep it together.
Maintaining a professional facade isn't about being polite. It is about cognitive discipline. We have to override that mammalian instinct to bite back and instead move from the raw shock of the attack to a deliberate, calculated strategy of defense.
But wait, standing there and just taking the hit? It feels like weakness. It feels like conceding the point.
I know it feels that way, but it's not. And this is exactly where the source introduces the countermaneuver.
Okay, what is the countermaneuver?
It's the phrase, standing your ground. The text defines this as refusing to be pushed backwards or firmly defending your position without losing your temper or becoming aggressive.
Refusing to be pushed backwards. That is a very specific spatial concept.
It really is. It implies rootedness. It implies mass. And the source provides just an absolute masterclass in how to verbally execute this rootedness.
Oh, right. It actually gives the exact quote you should deploy in that boardroom the moment the bus hits you.
Yes, it does.
Let me read it. The recommended quote is, actually, as we agreed in our last email thread, I was responsible for the design, while the timeline was a shared team responsibility.
Right.
Let's focus on how we can fix the delay together.
It's so good.
It is. Let's strip that sentence down to its studs, because the architecture of it is brilliant. It essentially executes 3 distinct operations in about 10 seconds.
Let's hear them.
Operation 1. It calmly states the parameters of the reality. There's no hyperbole, no raised voice, just facts.
Right, you're not shouting, you're just clarifying.
Exactly. Then, Operation 2. It introduces hard, auditable data. It explicitly says, as we agreed in our last email thread.
Oh, I love that part. You are pulling out the receipts right there in front of executive leadership.
Yes, you instantly neutralize their subjective blame with objective proof. You're saying, go check the emails.
Which is so powerful. But the third operation is the truly lethal one, strategically speaking.
The pivot.
Yes. The end of the quote says, let's focus on how we can fix the delay together. It pivots the energy away from the past, which is the assignment of blame, and redirects it entirely toward the future.
Toward the actual solution to the CEO's problem.
Exactly.
Here is where it gets incredibly interesting to me. By making that pivot to the solution, you aren't just defending yourself. You are actively seizing control of the entire meeting's agenda.
You're taking the steering wheel right out of their hands.
You really are. It reminds me a lot of the martial art Aikido.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Right. Because in Aikido, you never meet a strike with a hard opposing block.
Yeah.
You don't punch back.
You use their own energy against them.
Exactly. You take the attacker's forward momentum, their kinetic energy, and you redirect it harmlessly past you, while maintaining your own absolute center of gravity.
That is so visually striking.
So they throw you under the bus, and instead of throwing one back, you just step aside, let their momentum carry them right into the wall, and you redirect the room's attention to the actual project.
The Aikido analogy perfectly captures the mechanism of emotional intelligence at work here. Because emotional intelligence, particularly in conflict, is rarely about managing the actual content of an accusation.
Right. It's not about the details of the timeline.
Exactly. It is almost entirely about managing the process of the interaction. When you stand your ground, defensive, rooted, unbothered, and pivot to the solution, just think about how that reshapes the power dynamic in the eyes of the CEO.
The attacker looks terrified. I mean, they just look like a panicking animal scrambling for high ground.
They look totally out of control.
But the person who absorbs the attack, parses the data, and pivots to the deliverable. They signal immense executive function. They literally look like the only adult in the room.
They look like the person who should actually be running the project.
Exactly.
You are demonstrating to the leadership that your commitment to the structural integrity of the project supersedes your own ego. You are actively refusing to participate in the toxic subculture your colleague just tried to initiate.
You have completely contained the breach.
You have.
But standing your ground with that level of tactical precision really only works if the attack is deliberate. Like, what happens when we deploy these intense defensive maneuvers against someone who wasn't actually trying to hurt us?
Oh, that's a really important distinction.
Because if we treat every single perceived slight like a boardroom ambush, the collateral damage to our relationships is going to be massive. Which brings us to a completely different category of conflict in our source material.
The illusion of malice.
Yes, the conflicts born of pure accident.
Right. And the source uses the phrase, getting your wires crossed, to describe this phenomenon, which is actually a historical metaphor.
It is. It originates from the early days of telecommunications and those physical telephone switchboards.
I love the mechanics of that metaphor.
Me too. A switchboard operator had to physically plug a patch cord into a specific jack to connect two people on a call. And if they plugged the cord into the jack just like 1 millimeter to the left...
You were suddenly connected to a total stranger in a different city.
Exactly. Your wires were literally crossed. It was a mechanical routing error, completely devoid of malicious intent.
And that lack of intent is the crucial variable here. The source applies this mechanical failure to modern office environments with some highly relatable scenarios.
Oh, they're so relatable.
Imagine an angry colleague confronting you because they believe you missed a critical Friday report deadline, but your calendar clearly indicates the deadline is next Tuesday.
Right. Total miscommunication.
Or you log into your email and realize you have been excluded from the calendar invite for a major strategic meeting involving your own department.
Okay, in that moment, our evolutionary hardware betrays us all over again.
Every time.
Because the brain's negativity bias immediately assumes the absolute worst-case scenario. We don't assume a routing error.
No, of course not.
We assume the colleague is trying to sabotage our performance review by fabricating a fake deadline. Or we think they are executing some covert political maneuver to freeze us out of departmental decision-making.
We project intent onto incompetence or just simple random variance.
We really do.
And the negativity bias you mentioned is a well-documented survival mechanism. I mean, in the ancestral environment, assuming that a rustling bush was a predator rather than just the wind, that kept you alive.
Better safe than sorry.
Exactly. But in a modern corporate environment, interpreting a missed calendar invite as a predatory attack triggers that exact same severe cortisol spike.
Which is exhausting.
It is. So the source introduces a critical psychological intervention here. It's the phrase, giving someone the benefit of the doubt.
Right.
This is defined as the active choice to believe that someone's intentions were neutral or good, even when their actions caused friction, especially when you lack concrete proof of malice.
And the text makes a very blunt assertion about this. It warns that if you assume everyone is out to get you, you will be miserable.
It's a guarantee.
But giving the benefit of the doubt, I don't know, it always feels so naive to me. Like, let me play devil's advocate here for a second. If we constantly give people grace, if we assume every slight is just crossed wires, don't we risk becoming completely passive? I mean, How do we differentiate between a simple routing error and a subtle slow-motion bus throwing?
It's a fine line.
Right. If someone accidentally leaves me off 3 executive emails in a row, at what point does giving the benefit of the doubt just turn me into a doormat?
This raises an important question, and it's really the central tension of workplace diplomacy. But the mistake is viewing the benefit of the doubt as a permanent state of denial or some sort of moral concession.
Okay, so what is it then?
It's neither of those things. It is an initial diagnostic protocol.
A diagnostic protocol.
Yes. It is a tool for data collection, not a blind hook.
Okay, walk me through the mechanics of that. How does that actually work?
So when you experience the anomaly, let's say, the missed invite, deploying the benefit of the doubt, regulates your own internal threat response.
It keeps you calm.
Exactly. It keeps your prefrontal cortex online. It prevents you from firing off a highly aggressive, accusatory email that you literally cannot unsend.
Oh, we've all written those emails and thankfully deleted them before hitting send.
Right. So instead, it allows you to approach the anomaly with genuine curiosity. And the source actually provides the language for this.
What does it suggest you say?
You say, I know you didn't mean to leave me off the meeting invite, so I'll give you the benefit of the doubt. Let's just make sure we are on the same page moving forward.
Wow. That phrasing is deceptively powerful.
Isn't it?
It is incredibly subtle. You are verbally granting them the grace of assuming it was an accident, which totally bypasses their defensive reflexes.
Right, they don't feel attacked.
But you are simultaneously putting a massive spotlight on the behavior. You are clearly stating, I see the anomaly, I am tracking it, and I am establishing a baseline expectation that it will not happen again.
You are setting a rigid boundary, but it's wrapped in collaborative language.
That is brilliant.
If it truly was a switchboard error, they will be so relieved you aren't attacking them. They will apologize, and the system is repaired.
And if it wasn't?
If it was a deliberate political maneuver, you have just politely but firmly put them on notice that your surveillance system is active. You haven't yielded an inch of ground. You have simply gathered data on their intentions with maximum emotional intelligence.
I love that. Okay, so let's fast forward the timeline a bit.
Yeah.
We have successfully navigated the immediate crisis.
Okay.
Whether we executed a keto in the boardroom against a deliberate attack or we ran a diagnostic protocol on a crossed wire, the workday eventually ends. You commute home. You sleep.
You try to sleep anyway.
Right. But the next morning, the sun rises, you walk back into that building, and you still have to occupy the exact same physical space as this person.
Yeah, that's the hard part.
It is.
Yeah.
The source addresses this specific excruciating window of time, the hangover of conflict.
The awkward morning after.
Yes.
It is universally uncomfortable because the neurochemical surge, the adrenaline and cortisol from the day before hasn't metabolized and completely dissipated.
You're running on empty.
Right. And what remains is an atmosphere of deep interpersonal ambiguity. The conflict shattered the established equilibrium of your shared environment, and neither party really knows the new rules of engagement.
You are operating in a total state of behavioral limbo.
Exactly.
And the source provides our roadmap for escaping that limbo with two vital concepts, smoothing things over and being the bigger person.
Let's break those down.
Okay, the audio guide defines smoothing things over as the act of making a conflict less serious, typically by initiating friendly dialogue to restore harmony.
Sounds easy enough on paper.
Right, but the mechanism for achieving this is where the concept of being the bigger person comes into play. And the text is super careful to note this has absolutely nothing to do with physical stature.
No, it's not about being tall. It is entirely about structural and emotional maturity. It requires acting ethically and constructively, particularly when the opposing party behaved poorly.
Which is so hard to do.
It is. The source offers a highly tactical scenario for this maneuver. It dictates that you must literally walk over to the person's desk, present open body language specifically, a smile, and deliver the script.
Another script. I love these.
Yes. You walk up and say, hey, I know things got a bit heated yesterday, but I value our working relationship and I want us to move past it.
Okay, reading that script is easy. Executing it in real life takes a staggering amount of psychological fortitude.
It takes so much courage.
Think about the physical mechanics the source is demanding here. You are voluntarily walking into their territorial workspace.
Which puts you at a disadvantage, technically.
Yes, and by smiling, you are exposing vulnerability. And evolutionary psychology tells us that an open smile signals non-threat and subverts the mammalian defensive response.
You're showing you don't have a weapon.
Exactly. You are acknowledging the friction without relitigating the details of the fight, and you are explicitly prioritizing the working relationship.
That phrase, working relationship, is the linchpin of the entire concept.
How so?
Because smoothing things over is frequently misunderstood as a demand for forced friendship or a requirement to just, validate the other person's bad behavior. But the text explicitly refutes this.
Right, you don't have to go get a beer with them after work. You don't even have to respect their personality.
Precisely. Being the bigger person means you possess the systemic awareness to prioritize a functional, efficient operational environment over your own ego's desire to feel self-righteous.
It reminds me of the mechanics of resetting a dislocated joint.
Oh, that's a visceral image.
It really is. Think about it. The conflict is the dislocation. The shoulder pops out of the socket. It is agonizing, and the arm is structurally useless.
Right.
To fix it, a physician has to grab the limb and forcefully manipulate the joint back into the socket. It requires a brief moment of intense, blinding pain as the bone snaps back into place.
And then the relief washes over you.
Yes. Initiating that conversation at their desk is the brief, intense pain of the reset. It is agonizing to swallow your pride and offer that olive branch. But enduring that 10 seconds of discomfort prevents a lifetime of chronic radiating pain and restores the full functionality of the limb, or in this case, your daily working environment.
That is an incredibly precise analogy. The localized discomfort of initiating repair is statistically negligible compared to the protracted systemic friction of a fractured working relationship.
Which fundamentally changes how we should view being the bigger person. On the surface, it's often coded as a moral concession. It feels like you are just letting the aggressor off the hook.
Right, like you're losing.
But strategically, isn't it actually a massive structural power play?
It absolutely is.
If you are the one crossing the room, initiating the repair, and setting the parameters of the recovery, you are demonstrating vastly superior executive control. The person who threw the tantrum is probably still paralyzed by their own emotional fallout, just waiting to see what happens.
We're stuck.
Right. By being the bigger person, you are proving that you possess the capacity to manage not just yourself, but them as well.
You become the architect of the environment. You dictate the climate. You signal that their erratic behavior was just a temporary weather event. But you are the climate. It is the ultimate demonstration of resilience.
I love that. But repairing the external environment is only half the equation, right?
Right.
You've reset the joint, the office is quiet, the emails are flowing again. But what is happening in the internal landscape? Because if you smooth things over outwardly but fail to process the conflict inwardly, you enter the final, most corrosive phase identified in our source material.
Which is?
You end up carrying what the text calls a grudge.
Holding a grudge. The source defines this as maintaining a sustained feeling of anger, bitterness, or resentment toward someone for a past offense.
A sustained feeling.
Yes. It emphasizes the chronic nature of this state, noting it can persist for weeks, months, or even years. It actually offers a really stark, illustrative example. It says, they had a fight 5 years ago, and he is still holding a grudge.
Half a decade of preserved resentment.
It's wild.
It's terrifying to consider the energy required to maintain a state of active bitterness for 5 years. But here's the paradox. When we hold a grudge, we feel completely logically justified.
Oh, of course, because we were wronged.
Right, we were the victim of an injustice. The other person violated the rules. We view the grudge as an internal system of accountability. Yet the source delivers a very explicit warning about this.
What's the warning?
It says that in a professional ecosystem, holding a grudge will only damage your own career trajectory.
It's completely self-destructive.
So why does internal invisible bitterness have external measurable consequences on our success?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, a grudge isn't just a feeling, it is an active cognitive load.
What do you mean by that?
It occupies massive amounts of your brain's processing power. Let's look at the mechanics of rumination.
Okay.
When you hold a grudge, you are repeatedly replaying the injustice in your mind over and over. This chronic rumination physically drains glucose from your brain.
Wait, really? It actually drains energy?
Yes. It reduces the metabolic resources available for complex problem-solving, strategic planning, and innovation. You are essentially running an outdated, heavy application in the background of your smartphone.
Oh, that makes so much sense.
Right. It doesn't look like it's doing anything on the home screen, but it is quietly draining your battery to 0% by noon every single day.
That completely reorients the concept for me. It's not just a bad mood, it's a measurable loss of cognitive bandwidth. And I imagine it severely distorts your decision-making as well.
Oh, it creates profound analytical blind spots.
Yeah.
If you harbor resentment toward a colleague, you lose the capacity to objectively evaluate their data.
Because you just want them to be wrong.
Exactly. You will find yourself opposing their initiatives not because the math is wrong, but simply because they are the ones presenting it. And management observes this.
Management always notices.
They do. They don't see your internal justification. They don't care who started it 5 years ago. They just see an employee who is inflexible, irrational, and acting as a bottleneck.
So even if you were the undisputed victim of a betrayal a year ago, if your visible resentment continues to introduce friction into the system today, leadership will identify you as the liability.
Exactly. Management requires problems to be solved, not preserved as historical monuments.
You are actively penalizing your own future for someone else's historical mistake. You have to force quit that background app.
You really do.
But letting it go is honestly the most ubiquitous, unhelpful advice in modern psychology. How do we actually execute the release of a grudge?
Well, the source material actually offers a brilliant structural clue right at the very end of the lesson.
Oh, what is it?
The audio guide instructs the listener to practice the vocabulary by leaving a comment, stating that writing the idioms down is the mechanical secret to moving a word from your passive vocabulary into your active vocabulary.
Okay, that linguistic distinction is critical. Let's define that. Passive vocabulary consists of concepts you comprehend when you encounter them externally, but you can't really access or deploy them yourself.
Right. And active vocabulary consists of tools you command and utilize to actively shape your environment.
Okay, so I wonder if we can apply that exact linguistic mechanism to the psychological release of the grudge itself.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Could the physical act of writing down our forgiveness be the mechanism that moves our release from a passive, theoretical desire into an active, structural reality?
There is immense neurobiological validity to that theory. Grudges derive their power from their amorphous nature.
Right, they're just these vague, heavy feelings.
Exactly. They fester in the unexamined silent corners of our consciousness as vague, overwhelming clouds of negative effect. But when you force yourself to actively articulate the parameters of the grudge...
Like sitting down and literally writing it out.
Yes. Writing, this is the specific action that occurred, this is the specific boundary it violated, and I am actively choosing to sever my emotional attachment to this data point.
Wow.
When you do that, you force the emotional memory through the language centers of the brain. You strip the memory of its physiological threat response. You convert a persistent, haunting feeling into a discrete, manageable file that can be permanently archived.
You transform yourself from a passive container of resentment into an active agent of your own cognitive freedom.
That is beautifully put.
To synthesize the incredible architecture we've explored today, we have traced the entire life cycle of a human conflict.
We really covered a lot of ground.
We did. We began in the sheer biological shock of the boardroom ambush, learning to suppress the instinct for mutual destruction and instead deploy the aikido of standing our ground.
Refusing to be pushed backward.
Right. Then we explore the necessity of the diagnostic protocol, giving the benefit of the doubt to prevent catastrophic collateral damage when wires inevitably cross.
Because they will cross.
Always.
Yeah.
We mapped the agonizing but necessary mechanics of resetting the dislocated joint the morning after to preserve the operational system.
Walking over to that desk.
Yeah. And finally, we uncovered the hidden cognitive tax of the grudge and the active linguistic mechanism required to permanently delete it from our system.
It is a profound behavioral framework. And what it ultimately reveals is that mastering these idioms isn't about achieving a C2 certification in English grammar.
No, not at all.
It is about acquiring the precise vocabulary required to execute advanced emotional intelligence. The words you possess define the boundaries of your reality.
That's so true. The language you use to frame a crisis determines the tools you have to dismantle it.
Exactly.
And as we close this deep dive, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final counterintuitive concept to consider. It is built entirely on the hidden architecture of the source material we just unpacked.
Oh, I'm excited for this.
Notice the inherent geometry of these advanced idioms we discussed today. They're almost entirely spatial and physical.
Oh, wow. You're right.
You throw a body under a bus, you stand your ground against kinetic force, wires physically cross in space, you occupy a bigger physical space, you physically hold a heavy weight.
They're all incredibly physical.
If the language our species instinctively uses to describe interpersonal conflict is so deeply rooted in the mechanics of physical space, gravity, and momentum, perhaps the secret to surviving your next high-stakes conflict isn't found in a textbook at all.
What is the secret then?
What if, the next time you face a toxic colleague, a boardroom ambush, or an agonizing misunderstanding, you stop trying to win a verbal debate? Instead, visualize the interaction purely as a physical balance exercise on a precarious surface.
Okay, I can picture that.
When someone throws a sudden punch, when they try to hurl you under the vehicle, you are under no obligation to catch their fist. And you certainly don't need to throw a blind punch back.
Because that just throws you off balance.
Exactly. You simply have to bend your knees, lower your center of gravity, firmly plant your feet, and let their own momentum carry them right over the edge. Let them lose their balance. You maintain yours.
That is a remarkable operational philosophy. Let the system destabilize around you while your core remains completely untouched.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. It has been an absolute masterclass in the mechanics of human behavior.
It has been a privilege to unpack it with you. Thank you for listening, and we wish you clarity and resilience in whatever conflicts you navigate wherever you are in the world.
Until next time, stay balanced.